Right, I've just come to a new point of view here. I'm going to generate a new camera. We control and click on that. Get my new camera here, and then I'm just going to delete the old one and call this one camera 1. There we go. Okay, and yeah, you need to, if you want to composite this over the background that we're going to provide, I'd make sure your values are pretty much the same. Okay, so you know, to the kind of 0.2 values, so minus 2.34 is probably fine, and the rest of them just copy them in as they are there. Okay, and then what else do we want to do? So we need to bring in the background, so we need to cut out some rocks from the front. We need to do a matte. Okay, so I'm going to bring in some geometry for that. Let's call this background. Well, it's background and foreground really, and I'm going to color it just so I know it's not the same as the other render nodes, but it's still important. So I can open that, drop a file, and then go inside and just locate it, go into my hip, and then I've got it in here, background cache. Grab that, and there we go, we've got these rocks. Okay, and before I forget, I'm going to go into the Redshift tab and into Tessellation and enable Tessellation. That will subdivide it at render time. And then I want to, I don't know why that's doing that. Make sure that we got good motion blur. So on all of these, okay, select all three. So the crocodile, the grain, and the hunter. I'm going to go in here, go to the Redshift tab again, and then where is it? Settings, and then down here to mesh deforms blur from velocity attribute. Okay, so that's going to use the V attribute on the points to calculate the motion blur. So turn that on, and then just double check. So in here, if we come here, we can see we've got the velocity attribute. I'll leave that one, but on the crocodile, I'm just going to calculate it again. Well, on the crocodile, I think we don't have it actually. So we definitely need to do compute velocity here, and that will give us the velocity attribute. See it there? Okay. And we can visualize it there. Okay, if I turn that off, it goes. Okay. And then I'll just copy this and do the same on my hunter, just to make sure it's all even at the end. Okay, great. What else do we need to do? So let's start a render so we can take a look if we get the where am I going, if the motion blur is working. Right, so obviously we still don't have the motion blur there. So one thing I forgot to do, we need to go not to the background but come to these and into the render tab, sampling, and then geometry velocity blur. So this will tell it to, you know, pull out that V attribute. And let's try that, we should see it. Oh, and also obviously we need to go into the Redshift RUP, go into Redshift, motion blur, turn on motion blur here, and we'll turn on both of these tabs as well. So enable mesh deformations and motion blur. So, you know, for example, for him when he's stretching, you know, we get a movement in the mesh itself, it will blur there. And for the particles, so for the grain as well. Okay, now we should see it. There we go. So I can see motion blur on the crocodile, on the hunter, the gun, and on the grain, on everywhere now. Perfect. So let me turn that off for a moment. So what I also want to do is kind of cut out this, the kind of background thing, well, foreground and background, but more importantly, we need to cut this out because we've already provided you with the render of the background. So we need to cut out this part, you know, the rocks which are in front, okay? Because this render can just sit on top of the other render, but we obviously need to cut these parts out. So it's quite easy. We just come into the background here, and when we come to, let's see, I think it's matte, and just enable matte. and then render that again, we should see it get cut off on this part. There we go. So you see that's cutting out the front now, but obviously anything that's behind the crocodile and hunter and the gun and the grain is left intact. The only problem now is that we get these, if I zoom in, we get these kind of harsh borders. So I'm just going to add a little bit of depth of field, because depth of field is already in our background, so we need to add it here so that the alpha, if we press A, you can't see it there actually, the foreground there, we need to blur these basically. Okay, so if we come into the camera, we turn it on in the camera, and make sure you have, if you don't have the this option, I've already got it turned on, I didn't realize that, but if you don't have this option, basically if you made a camera, and make sure that you turn on, you click this so that you get the redshift camera options, click on depth of field. I thought, yeah, I could see it's blurry here, but I'm not sure that we went through that together. Okay, and then to kind of work that out, so to configure that, you do that using the typical Houdini way, which is in sampling. Okay, and the focal distance I'm going to set to 5, and the f-stop will be 3. So I'll show you what they mean if we come into the scene view and then come out of our camera and turn the visualizer on our camera. You can see it there, and then click the handle, right click on it and go to focus handle, or you can press Z. Okay, and then we can see now what these values mean. Okay, I'll move them, so if I change the focal distance to 6, you can see it moves back, so this is the center of the focus. I go back to 5, that will be more, you know, where we want it, and then the f-stop is kind of this depth. Okay, so if we put that to 5, it will spread out a lot more and there'll be more in focus. Bring it down, we'll get a bit more blur, but really I'm just, you know, it's not going to have a big effect on this. I just want to blur these rocks in the foreground because they're far away from this the field of view there, so the field of focus. So I just want to blur these parts in the foreground there. Maybe if I turn that off, I can show you better. And hit this render again. After turning it off, we should see a sharper edge. Some parts are sharp, but that's because they're closer to the crocodile. So like these rocks are really, you know, in the same part as the crocodile and the hunter. Right, now you can see this harsh border at the bottom, you see that? And yeah, that won't look too good when we composite it over the background. So yeah, make sure we have depth of field turned on. Okay, another thing is if we take a look at the alpha here, we need this alpha gone for the background. So just come into the matte area and turn the alpha off, set that to 0. Okay, and then that will, that will get rid of the bottom. Okay, and let's see, I also want to, before I forget, I'm going to dive into here, set this to here. Okay, so I'm going to stop rendering now because it's pretty heavy with all of the grain in there. Okay, and jump into my out and let's configure this. So yeah, we've got that's fine. You could set this up if you want it to be safe. So right now it's just rendering anything with the visibility flag on. Okay, so all of these. So you know, you can set it up to only specifically render these, but you know, I'll just leave it as it is for now. So in our main, we want a bigger size, so I'm going to go to user specified resolution and I'm going to set it to 1920 by 1080. Okay, so if you wanted to, you know, for the best results, I would render it at the same size so that it matches up with our background. You could render it smaller and stretch it out, but obviously it's not gonna have the same quality. But that's up to you. And then the output will set up. If you want, you could also add some AOVs. Okay, so it's pretty easy. You just press plus here, and then you can add whatever you want. typical ones. You might want diffuse, and then you've got loads of options here: object ID, emission. You know, you might want the specular lighting. Where's that? We'll add them anyway, but I don't think we'll need to use them. Maybe reflections, and we have some subsurface on these, so we could add that. Where are you? Subsurface scatter. Okay, so we'll get different layers within our EXR to see the effects of all of these components in our render. Okay, let's see what else. Everything else here is fine. The settings, so for the actual samples. Okay, I'm going to push the min samples to 128. So this will affect how many times each pixel is sampled, and as a result will affect the quality. Okay, so the higher this number, the longer the render will take, but the you know, the better the quality, the less noise you'll have. So you know, you can play around with these values to a level of noise that's acceptable to you. This is what I'm going to leave it at. What else? Global illumination. We're going to want to turn that on to brute force. So we'll get some bounce lighting. So, you know, the light will fall onto the sand, for example, and then from there, the sand will light the crocodile as well, and vice versa. And we'll have 3 bounces, so it can go down, 1, 2, 3. But, you know, 3 is plenty. You won't see much difference between 3 and 2. But that's good. I think that's it. We'll need a... Oh yeah, obviously we want to render a frame range. Okay, so frame range. So I'm going to do this from 130 to 250. Okay, again, as many as you want. This is the frame range of our background render. And then the output. So we need to actually get a place for this to go to. So we can save it to our HIP, to our render is fine. We're going to render EXRs, which will save the AOVs as well within the same file, which is good. Let's give it a name, or maybe I'll do another folder. So I'll say final/render. I don't want $OS, which is the name of this. I'll just give it. I don't want that slash there, slash after the render, and then I'll just call it final render dot $F4, which we've already got. Okay, for each frame number, or F3 would be enough here, but I'll leave it at 4.exr. And I think that's it. We think we're good to go with the render. Yeah, so, and then we go to render to disk.